Good day and welcome to Series with Masters. I am Dr. EnRico Melson.
Dr. Mykio, Sankey.
I'm Johnny Seitz.
We are here today to discuss what we feel is an unprecedented type of combining of disciplines and methods into one meta-system approach, which we call the Integral Awareness Mastery and the Integral Awareness Medicine. What we should do is start with, I think, a brief introduction of each person and your background and your area of emphasis. And we will take it from there with a pretty free-flowing conversation and all, but in essence what we are representing are three different integral practitioners. And as this first time effort undertaking here to bring these three integral systems into one unified meta-system, and this is the first step in a series of such steps which we will be recording and presenting for the benefit of practitioners and patient clients wherever. So perhaps Johnny, you want to start?
Okay, generally it starts off with, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a doctor. Hello, I'm so-and-so, I'm a PhD. My credentials are, I was born classic autistic. And for me that means that I'm face blind, which means I don't remember faces. I'm unable to hold faces in my mind. So I have to look at something very different to know who someone is. And having grown up with a lifetime of not knowing who I'm talking to because of their face, I've had to learn to read bodies in a way that is far more in depth than what normal people do. You'll hear me use the word neurotypical a lot. In autism, we refer to people who are typically neurologically typical as neurotypicals, and us who are not as autistic or whatever. But being face blind, very early as a child, what I look at when I see somebody walking toward me is their neuromuscular intent, their neuromuscular juxtaposition to me. I'll figure out, you must know me because you're coming toward me with an openness. But I'll see tension and I'll say, uh-oh, am I in trouble? Did I do something that made you mad? I read neuromusculature like an animal does. They say that the autistic brain has a much more developed back or reptile brain. So I look more like a dog does, like an animal does. You drive in the driveway, you clip the mail post, and you walk up to the dog, hey Rover, and the dog's backing off because he sees that you're tense and upset about something that just happened. That's what I see. So I've had to develop profoundly different ways of figuring out who people were. And one of the ways I did it was, without realizing, I broke people down into three different body types, not based on endomorph, exomorph, but based on the child that you were and how you got to your feet. And it's, I've used it for a lifetime, but it turns out that it's a very user-friendly system that a lot of people are now adapting. And just by looking at abduction, adduction, and femoral rotation, I can know how the child saw themselves in relationship to their world and everything in it, and how best to talk to them so they don't get mad at me, how best to get them to hear what I'm saying. I imagine you'll ask me more questions about the three biotypes, but basic qualification for being what I do is that I can't ignore neuromuscular tension. And in autism, there's usually a perseverant area. Some of us are hooked on train schedules. I happen to be hooked on bones and bodies. I can put my hand on a person's body and literally see in my head every muscle and bone and exactly what they're doing, where there's tension built up, where there's dead zones. It's a defensive mechanism on an animal basis. It's the same thing a gorilla does when you approach it, or a dog. I just am able to visualize it so clearly that I can also show other people what I see and explain why I know what I know. It turns out to be really useful in helping people let go of tension or integrate parts of their body that aren't working. What I do with it in my studio is I had to learn play the hard way. They say that if you take an autistic child and you throw him a ball, he'll thank you, take the ball and walk away. He doesn't get that he's supposed to throw it back. But these games like catch are what teach our bodies, just like bear cubs fight to discover how to defend, how to attack, how to live their lives, how to find balance, how to find their strength. These games with autistic children are done in much more depth and with much more rigor. And they're to teach self-regulation, to teach interaction, to teach balance. In my work in the studio, I have bunches and bunches of toys where I help people to find some of the things that they didn't discover in childlike games about self-regulation, about balance, about stress handling. And it turns out that it makes people's lives work better, makes stress into a friend rather than something they try to get rid of, and opens up parts of themselves that have been locked up for decades due to emotional trauma, physical trauma. I teach at a college of psychology. I'm in the faculty at Ryukon College of Psychology, and I got I got asked to work there. First, my wife brought me in and told her classmates that she had an autistic husband, and they said, "Oh, bring it in. We want to see one." I was a curiosity, but when I ended up at a hypnosis class, and they would put people in trance, when they would say, "I want to ask a question," they get to me, I would say, "What is it about your left arm and your brother's death?" And the person would break open like a watermelon, and then the guy would, "How did you know that? How did you know that arm was loaded?" And for me, movement breaks down into a series of modifiers. If there's too much density, there's a specificity to that density. If there's just these markers that I didn't know I knew that made me aware of what I see when I look at people. As a defensive mechanism, turn out to be very valuable for therapists being able to read clients and assess the potential for trauma being encapsulated in the neuromusculature, and more importantly, for preparing the body's core to handle it when they're ready to look at it. In other words, if the core isn't strong enough, there is no problem. If I don't feel I can handle a psychological trauma from my past, what trauma? Only when my body and my core feels strong enough to handle it will I allow myself to remember it. So I do a lot of work teaching psychotherapists and other groups of people how to prepare the core physiologically through the games that they should have learned in childhood to handle the stress of psychological insult or emotional or physiological insult. And when the body is prepared to handle it, we've just expedited the process of handling it instead of 20, 30, 40 years before child abuse becomes even known to the person. Those 30 or 40 years are used gaining a core strength, a readiness to process that stress. And then the mind says, "Oh, now I can remember." I can expedite that process in the same way I do with stroke survivors in preparing the body to handle the stress of standing up, for example. And I use ancient modalities, things that have long been forgotten and desperately need to be remembered. Ergo, the reptile brain is a useful thing. Sorry if I chatted a long time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Well,
A lot to come.
I got into my field of acupuncture kind of, I got sidetracked initially in the beginning. I say sidetracked because my whole life I've been kind of, at least since my teenage years, I'm kind of a rebel. As I got older, I decided, somewhere back in my mind, I didn't want to work for anyone else. So early on, I wanted to be a rock musician. So 60s, 70s, I did that whole thing and, did what musicians did back in those days. And somewhere along the way, I decided I didn't like the game to get a record contract. It was just something about it was, I didn't want to sell my soul just to be famous. So I walked away. Next thing, I met a person who was in the martial arts, and early on as a child I was in the martial arts. And so he asked me, "Hey, you want to start a martial arts store?" In the meantime, I was working out with him, and ended up he became a very famous ninja star in the 80s. And somewhere along the way in the 80s, I decided, what am I doing with martial arts? Because it's not about really anything with integrity. It's about kicking butt. But it took me a few years to get out of the debt and getting rid of the store. And all this time, my wife was asking me, why don't you work with me? And she became acupuncture. She went to school in the early 80s. I think she was licensed in 85 or 86. And, my other friends, they say, well, when you work with your wife, everything kind of gets a lot of attention, so I was a little bit apprehensive. But anyway, in a roundabout way, I decided, in order to work with acupuncture legally, I have to go to school. And interesting, the first time I touched the needle, I knew exactly how to needle. I knew how to hold the needle. I could needle myself. First time I did pulses, I knew how to read the pulses. I didn't know what they meant, but I could read at least 5 levels of the pulses. They teach you 3 levels in school. And so I said, there's something very, very natural. And so I went through this process. Somewhere around 1995, I was during meditation. I was very in deep meditation, and at the time I was going to write a book on nutrition and raw medicine, raw foods and Chinese medicine. And a voice came to me, telepathic voice, said, there are enough people working on the physical. We need to work on some levels above the mental level. Would you be interested? And it was so profound that it got me out of my meditation. I couldn't get back to it. All I could think of was chakras. And so from then, it was a process of being very, very quiet and tapping into a field. Some people call it the Akashic records. The name doesn't matter. But I was able to bring forth some ancient philosophies, but bring it into a more usable format. And this came up through that whole process. Esoteric acupuncture was born. Now, esoteric acupuncture, most people still don't understand what it means. Acupuncturists are here for the first time, think, a new kind of modality is using tetrahedrons and triangles. And if I learn the sequencing, I can learn something different. But it's not about being a technician. Esoteric acupuncture comes from esoteric means something hidden, something not readily seen. Acupuncture comes from 2 words, acus, which is Latin, which means needle or obelisk. Obelisk stands for temple. Puncture comes from the English word meaning to pierce. So what we're doing is we're piercing our temple, at various locations to what? To open up something, to align something else. We're not so interested in moving pain, moving blood stagnation, although that is also a function whenever you put a needle in, it can also do that simultaneously. But we're interested in moving it to a higher realm. Also, about that time, 95, during one of my meditations, they said a lot of kids, the children coming through, are going to be at a level that the adults are not going to understand. The indigos, the crystalline, the golden children, and whatever the name is, they're coming through with really fast brains. And we need to work with consciousness at a higher level than the old schools. So this is an attempt to first align you, and especially for the practitioners. The esoteric acupuncture is really not for the clientele initially. It's for the practitioners, because most practitioners that I know need to be aligned. And it's about watching your diet and also understanding that everything that you eat, everything you think, all your emotions is going through that needle. This is something that's not taught in school. So I tell people when I lecture, what if you're treating a diabetic that's coming into your office this morning and last night you had a piece of pie? Well, that sugar is going through your needle. What if you're treating someone who's trying to get off alcohol and you had a glass of organic wine last night? Well, it was last night, I slept it off. This morning, I had a cup of coffee and everything's fine. Well, no, the energy of the alcohol is coming through the needle and it could trigger something on the person trying to get off. So everything that goes into your system gets put back through your hands, through your mind, through the needles, into your clientele. So this is just another attempt to make the practitioners aware. You decide to be a practitioner, you have more responsibilities. It comes with the territory. We have more responsibilities. Now we have to be aware of some higher level of thinking. And so as we align ourselves, we'll be able to, project different type of pure energy, or let's say a more refined energy into the clientele. And that's basically the genesis of esoteric acupuncture.
Great. Well, I guess it's my turn. And I'll talk a little bit about my background. First of all, what's relevant, the first thing that comes to me is the understanding that my bloodlines are from all over the world. And having grown up in inner city, tough ghetto kind of places, like Johnny gets on my case about sometimes, but actually coming from that kind of multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural lineage, created in me from an early stage a sense that I'm here on this planet to try to bring many things together, different cultures, different systems, and then professionally even different systems of medicine and healing, which is part of the basis for our being here today. Although I grew up in very impoverished, economically impoverished and socially impoverished settings in Los Angeles, education was always very, very high on the list for our family, and a tough love kind of orientation that was taken by our family to education and to keeping the family together. And fortunately, we have defied most of the major statistics of families, large families growing up in the inner cities. I was able to go off to some of the top universities in the world, like Harvard and Berkeley and Stanford, and places of this nature, but along the way I was able to take multidisciplinary approaches to what I was trained in. I first began with formal training in medical hypnotherapy in 1979, 30 years ago. From there I trained in many other forms of mind-body integration, neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, HUNA, many other systems. I also trained in traditional Western medicine systems of oncology for 2 years, family practice, preventive medicine, public health, epidemiology, occupational medicine, pain management, medical disability, and then later integrative holistic medicine and anti-aging regenerative medicine. I was later then trained in Ayurvedic medicine and many other systems of sort of shamanistic practices and bioenergetics and spiritual healing practices. So again, that's been about, for me, bringing all of these different systems together within myself, and then also going much beyond myself and finding other paradigms and other systems so that we could bring them together in a larger unity, which is this sense of integral medicine. Something that happened to me very early on in my postdoctoral years, back in 1982, I'd like to share, which was the beginnings of the AIDS epidemic. I was an intern in New York City, and being an intern, you had to do whatever was necessary for your patient. You couldn't punt it off and hand it over to somebody else. So I often found myself in a situation where I was poked with needles and had blood spurted into my eyes, or things poured onto me because I was trying to do the work of 2 or 3 people when others were afraid to go into the room with these patients who were so highly infected. And many other such exposures to very lethal toxins, whether they be infectious exposures or chemical exposures or inhalational exposures. Never once did I get ill. Never once did I convert positive to HIV or to TB or to hepatitis or anything of this nature, and it had to do with the fact that I, as Mykio explains in his journey, I hear the voices, sometimes even see the visions, but over the course of my life I was given guidance through angelic or divine intervention to be told what to do, how to handle a situation that might be a very critical situation at that time. And as a result, I began to truly explore and then ultimately to surrender to a consciousness and an intention of divine unconditional love. And that be the basis for how I do what I do. That be the basis for healing. That if someone who is dying of some incredibly infectious disease process contacts me, I get exposed to it, I take that moment immediately and detach myself from any personal kind of fears or anger or worries, and in that space go straight to the source of divine love, and in that process do various channelings, so to speak, of that kind of energy, and activate my immune system, and as a result be able to deal with whatever was that incursion at the time. That became the core of this system that I've been working to develop over the last 15, 16 years, called Integral Awareness Medicine. And so what is particularly different about this approach of Integral Awareness Medicine is that it is something that is centered in identity, and centered in the identity of all of us, not just those who are on a deliberate course of mastery, or those of us who have been blessed and gifted with certain particular talents or predispositions, but it is a core identity of all of us, that being that we are divine beings, that we are truly masters in our own ways to be expressed, to be revealed, yet at our core we are masterful in nature. We are knowers and we are healers by nature, by identity, and therefore our responsibility in going forward in this world is to express our true nature. Momentary comment on the medical profession. If I were to go over there and put on my white coat, typically, and step into my Western doctor mode, one of the first things that I would do is an act of violence. That act of violence would be for me to say, in some sort of way, to reinforce the expectation that I'm in charge of your healing. You are not a healer. And guess what? Even though I'm in charge of your healing, most of what I'm dealing with you for, I can't even heal. But I have the power. I have the authentication. You, as a person, are not a healer. So this is actually an act of violence that is institutionalized within the framework of Western medicine. And so part of what we do in Integral Awareness Medicine is begin to look at those core principles of any healing system, whether it be Eastern, Western, whatever, and examine what those core principles are. And from the standpoint of the integral awareness, where we can begin with the identity as a divine being, with the identity as master, with the identity as healer, with the identity as a being of unconditional love, as the primary life force that flows through us. From there, we can take it all the way down through the physiologic layers, the bioenergetic layers, the biomechanical layers, the social cultural layers, the environmental layers, etc., by employing these cosmic principles. So that gets to be a little heady and all, but in essence, kind of what we're talking about here is, maybe Johnny, you describe yourself as, what I'm hearing, as primarily sort of working on that physical level and then working all the way up. Mykio, what I'm hearing from you is sort of, you're working maybe from that way high level and then bringing it down. And I think myself, I tend to work a little bit mostly in that sort of mental body level, in that area in the middle, and then kind of take it in both directions, if that may make sense.
No, I
Well,
think it's
the way,
described.
one of the things that I've been asked as acupuncturist, when you insert the needles, do you tonify or sedate? And I said, I don't do anything. I put the needles in straight, and part of it is, okay, they're trusting me to know the location of certain points. But their obligation, their part of their job is, once I put the needles in, let their own energy dictate if it needs to be sedated or tonified, or maybe just neutral. So I just put the needle in and let them do the work. It's never, not even at this level, not a linear level, but at that level of the cell, and cells have what I call key codes. If we can unlock the innate, inherent intelligence in those key codes, I just step back and let, my job is already finished. I put X amount of needles in certain sequence, and then now they have to do some of it. So in essence, my job is easier in a lot of acupuncturists where they have to tonify and sedate and do moxa and et cetera. I put needles in and say, okay, I did my part. Now you as the client, patient client, you do your part. I'll come back and remove them and you turn you over. So Yeah, in that way, I really feel that they have to do some part. I'm just gonna help them a little bit along the way. I may show you this path is a little easier than this path, but you have to do some of the work. And I really believe that they need to take that commitment to, whatever it is, change the diet, exercise, whatever it is. But part of it is, once the needle's in, there's something in the energy, the prana, the chi, there's something there that knows what they need much more than I do. So I let them do some of the work.
It's funny because you spoke a minute ago about indigo children. I get accused of being a member of that group because autistic people. I have no separation between my conscious and subconscious brain. When they put me on one of these machines that test where you are in alpha, beta, and theta, all my brainwaves are in theta. I live there. It means this instant right now is all there is for me. I don't have any sense of time. And it provides me the opportunity to truly be a vacuum, an emptiness in the face of somebody in front of me. But I have this gift of understanding a bunch of the machinery of the human body. And all I do is offer challenge and with no anticipation or judgment, potential solutions where the person's own experience of discovering their power to heal or to handle stress comes up for them. So it's really kind of an interesting juxtaposition. The esoteric, the medical, chemical, analytical, precedent following, and the animal. And I firmly believe that the human resources are beyond phenomenal. I consulted on a book with somebody, and I was saying, well, you know what, poison ivy, and she said, what do you mean? Well, wherever you see poison ivy within 15 feet, you find jewelweed, which is the natural antidote. I work with stroke survivors, people with urinary incontinence, all kinds of things, and that most doctors give up on because their precedence, their knowledge doesn't offer an idea of what to do about it. And I count on the body's own natural to stay aliveness. You hear about the 90-pound woman whose child is in a truck on fire. She tears the door off the car and hurls it to save her kid, and the next day can't move the car door. I put people in a position to refine that power, and when the conscious mind gets involved, it says, well, I can't do that. I can turn off, or it's not turned on in the first place. I can pick up that 300-pound bench and carry it out the door. I know that because I carried it in here. I can attach that power in me the way an animal does, because I don't have the conscious mind saying, well, wait, that won't work, or you could get hurt. I see a vision and make it happen. And I use a lot of stuff I steal from martial arts, from military training, from the body in crisis, and what it will do to stay alive, to get stroke survivors on a leg that doesn't feel, doesn't have any neuromotor control. And I say, lift your good leg. What? Lift your good leg. Boom! The other leg locks in. What happened? How did that happen? The body knew to survive it had to do something that was going to fall. So I work in the extremes of what the animal will discover to stay alive, and then making that process owned by the individual so that they can count on it.
Well, it sounds like, from all three approaches, we are all speaking about the innate intelligence, the innate programming, the innate capacity of a person to heal themselves. We are guides. We facilitate, we assist, but we are not the healers to anyone else. And that's a radical departure from a lot of what is out there, not only in terms of Western medicine approaches, but even in terms of the community of healers. Because so much of the time, we're going around saying, I'm a healer. Let me heal you, or let me heal her or him, whatever it is, without instead taking a more true approach, I believe, to say, let us assist in activating the self-healer within you. And by taking that approach of activating the self-healer within another person, comes what I would like if we could go into just a moment. How do we have to be as such assistance as such facilitators of that. How do we have to place ourselves?